What's up, Jacklips? Today I'm really excited to say that I'm planning to participate in the Make Your Myth Taker readathon in June. This readathon was created by Ashley from A Frolic Through Fiction and Charlotte from Bookmarks and Blogging, who are also the Myth Take Reads book club. But I just think that this readathon sounds like so much fun because the idea is that there are 16 different paths that you take to create a character, one of 16 different types of characters, and they're all characters that you would find in fantasy stories. So there's 4 classes, which are Rogue, Warrior, Sorcerer, and Royal Court. And then several of the characters are also connected, so you can cross over if you weren't liking a book that you had picked, or if you wanted to start on one character and then cross over to make another one because you liked the first couple of prompts better, you could do that. So I just think that sounded really cool, and I also love that it's only a 4-book readathon because some of these readathons really intimidate me. I'm not a slow reader, but I frequently don't find time to read, mostly because I just have too many hobbies and also because I'm terrible about just not picking up books. But I've been really in a reading mood lately, which is great because I've been in a slump for the last couple of months. But I love that it's just 4 books, so I feel much more like that's something that I can accomplish. So I'm very excited about it. And I'm also using this as an opportunity to read some of the books that I have on my shelf, because I own a lot of books that I have not read yet, and I really want to get that number down some. So one part of the readathon is that you can, when you're creating your character, you could either be creating an original character or you could be recreating a character that you particularly love, and I've decided to do that latter thing. And I'm going to be recreating Billy Lurk from the Dishonored series. Billy Lurk is basically the right hand of the most infamous man in the Empire of the Isles, an assassin named Dowd. And Dowd is actually the person who killed the Empress in the first game. That's not a spoiler, it happens in like the first few minutes of the game and you see his face and everything. But Billy is his right hand, and he leads this band of like assassin mercenaries. Within the Empire of the Isles, there is this being called the Outsider, and he is basically a whale god, as much as I can tell, and his favorite pastime is giving people powers and then just seeing what they're going to do with them, and then judging them harshly for what they do with them. But that's how he's spending his immortality, and Dowd is one of those people that's been given powers. Corvo from the first game is another. Basically all the protagonists have outsider powers. Billy initially has outsider powers because of her connection to Dowd, and then later on she's actually the protagonist of the 3rd game and she is given powers of her own. So because of this, I had some trouble deciding what path to take in recreating Billy, and I've ultimately decided to go with the assassin path. But an additional rule in the readathon is that if you finish your original 4 books, you can add additional traits to your character by reading any of the other prompts from the other character paths. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to finish my first 4 books and have some time left in the month. And if I do, I'm planning to add some traits to Billy from the Witch, Goddess, and Mercenary paths. And so since those all have 4 more prompts as well, I've decided to just pick a book for every prompt for all 4 of those paths, with the assassin ones being the 4 that I have to read, and then I just picked some for all of the others so that I would have the most choice possible when I get there and can kind of pick what I'm feeling like reading once I get through my initial 4. There is some overlap because the Goddess and Witch path both have the same 2nd prompt, because on all of the categories the 2nd prompt is a class-wide prompt. The Witch and Mercenary also have some crossover. I say Goddess and Witch have the class-wide. Mercenary and Witch have a crossover one in common because those are 2 paths that you could cross over on. So because there's some overlap, I decided to go ahead and just pick a different book each time that prompt came up so that I would have the most choice possible. It seems a little mad, it made sense when I wrote it down, but it's fine. Before I launch into my Make Your Myth Taker readathon TBR, I do want to mention a couple of other books that I'm planning to read in June. The first is Little Fires Everywhere, which is, I started a book club with some people that I know. It's a mixture of like my coworkers and friends, and it was just as an attempt to kind of build some community and help us stay sane during this just crazy situation with the pandemic. We've picked our first book. We just did that recently, it took a while. But we picked our first book, which is Little Fires Everywhere, and I'm probably not going to finish it by the end of May, although I'm going to try, but I may be reading it in June. I will also be rereading The Murder of Roger Ackroyd for a class that I am taking. Those are the only other books I'll be reading, and so without further ado, here is my TBR for Make Your Myth Taker. Alright, so I'm going to be looking down some because I do have like my notebook here with all of my books written and everything. I'm covering one of them because I can't show it to you. But the first prompt for the assassin path is to read a friend pick because, you know, an assassin needs to take risks. So the book that I'll be reading for this is The Goblin Emperor by Catherine Addison. This is my best friend's favorite book. She's been recommending it to me for literal years, and it's been on my shelf for just over a year now, or maybe just about a year. I bought it last May, and it just sounds really great. So this book is about a young goblin named Maya who is a distant son of the emperor of this fantasy realm that he lives in, and his father and all of his brothers, half-brothers, die in an airship accident, and he suddenly is made emperor and has to figure out how to rule, which is something he's never been prepared for because he was never expected to take the throne. Everything that my friend loves about this are things that I have loved in a game that I'm currently playing, which is called Greedfall. We were talking about this recently, and she thinks that I'm going to love this because everything I love in Greedfall is in this book. So I'm really excited to read this. The second prompt for the Assassin Pathway is to read a book with a dark cover. And for this one, I've decided to go with Second Chance by James Patterson. This is the second book in the Women's Murder Club series, and I really loved the first book of this series. It's not like an all-time favorite, but I really enjoyed it. It was really entertaining. It was a great read. It's a very fast read as well. But the Women's Murder Club series follows these 4 women who are in different professions related to the criminal justice system, and they work together to solve murders. The third prompt for the Assassin Pathway is to read a secret book, so I'm not going to show you what that book is. The last prompt for the Assassin Pathway is to read a quick read. So for this, I'm reading Infidel by Pornsak Pichetshote and a bunch of other people whose names I can't remember, Jose Villarrubio and Jeff Powell, I believe. But this is a graphic novel that follows a young Muslim woman who moves into a new apartment building that is mostly inhabited by other people from various minority groups. And it turns out that the apartment building is also haunted by some sort of creature that feeds on xenophobia. So I have a feeling this is going to be a heavy read, but it's also quite short, so I think it's going to be a pretty quick one. I've been wanting to read this for a while now. I've been putting it off because I think it is going to be heavy and I'm probably going to be sad when I finish reading it, but I do really want to read it, so yeah, this is a good opportunity. If I finish those 4 books, which I'm really hoping I can do, I feel like it's really manageable, but if I finish those 4 books and start pulling from other character paths for my recreation of Billy Lurk, the first path I'll be looking to will be the Witch Path. And the first prompt for the Witch Path is read a book featuring an animal. So for this, I have The Salt Line by Holly Goddard Jones. So this is a dystopian novel set in the future in which it's hard to describe, but basically the world, or at least North America, has come under attack from killer ticks. And as a result, society has receded behind these scorched earth barriers known as the Salt Line that protect them by keeping the ticks out of their cities. And this follows several tourists who go on one of these few voyages outside of the Salt Line as a part of just thrill-seeking, and they go outside of the Salt Line and end up in this like little town, a small community that exists outside of it, and end up becoming hostages. And so it's about what do they have to do and how far are they willing to go to get back into the safety of the society within the Salt Lines. So the animal in this obviously is the killer ticks, and I think this is going to be really interesting. It's definitely not what I usually read. I'm not typically a dystopian reader, but when I bought this, the guy at my local bookstore was like, "Oh, have you read this?" And I said, "No, I haven't, but it sounds really interesting and I do like to support local authors." But the guy at the bookstore was like, "Oh, you're gonna love it. You can't go wrong with killer ticks." So, you know, that was a really strong endorsement of this. I think it's gonna be great. The second prompt for the Witch Path is to read a book with a foiled cover. For this one, I have Wayward Son by Rainbow Rowell. This particular edition is the Barnes & Noble special edition, and it does have a little bit of foil, a little silver foil here. There's some stars, and it's actually also on, there was a receipt in there. It's also on the hardback itself. The third prompt for the Witch Path is to read a book featuring a magical battle. And for this, I've decided to go with Vicious by V.E. Schwab. I am not certain that there is a magical battle in here, but I do know that this book is about two superpowered former friends, now enemies, who are trying to kill each other. That is my understanding of it, and that sounds like the kind of thing that would have a magic battle in it. If I'm wrong, I'll pick another book, but yeah, for now I'm going to go with Vicious. The last prompt for the Witch Path is to read a book featuring occult themes. This could be witches, ghosts, tarot, clairvoyance, anything like that. And for that, I've decided to go with Macbeth, because it is my understanding that there are witches in Macbeth. This was a book I was supposed to read in like 9th grade English or 10th grade English, and we just didn't get there because we had too many things to read before that, and a lot of people just weren't doing the reading. I was really salty about it, but now it is finally time for me to read Macbeth. The next path I'll be pulling from is the Mercenary Path, and the first prompt for this is to read an anticipated read. For me, this is going to be The Empress of Salt and Fortune by Nebo. This is one that has just recently been on my radar, and I just got this copy. But it follows a woman who is put into a political marriage and sent to a different region, and there she is rather hated, and this just follows her rise to power, but it's told from the perspective of her handmaiden named Rabbit. And this is just very different from what I usually read. The next prompt for Mercenary is to read a book with a weapon on the cover. And I've discovered I don't own a lot of books with weapons on the cover, so what I've chosen for this is one of the few books that's not from my owned library. Instead, I'm reading Trail of Lightning by Rebecca Roanhorse. From what I understand, this is an urban fantasy that takes place after most of the country has been drowned, but it takes place on one of the American Indian reservations, and the main character and her sidekick are both Native American, which is really neat, and they fight monsters, and also I assume there's some sort of like major destroy the world thing about to happen, because that is often what's happening in urban fantasy. The next prompt is the overlap one with The Witch, which is to read a book featuring a magical battle. And for this, I've decided to go with one of my favorite books as a reread, which is Dying is My Business by Nicholas Kaufman. This follows a man named Trent who has woken up in front of this brick wall one day, has no idea who he is or where he is or anything. Turns out he's in New York City, and he gets recruited into the criminal underworld after discovering that he can no longer die. He's completely incapable of dying. Every time he dies, he just comes back to life. And then, as a part of being in the underworld, he eventually finds his way into, stumbling into the magical world that is existing just out of eyesight in New York City. I do remember there being some magic battles in this. I don't remember exactly what they were, but I do remember that they were there. And it's just been too long since I've read this. It is a favorite. This is from an so far unfinished trilogy that I think is definitely worth a read anyway. This and its sequel, Dynasty Dead, are amazing. Apparently it was not financially viable for the author to write the last book because the first two didn't sell very well, which is, I think, really a shame because I do love these. The last prompt for the Mercenary Path is to read a book inspired by history or legend, and for this I've chosen A Flaw in the Blood by Stephanie Barron. This follows Patrick Fitzgerald, who is an Irish barrister, and he is called to help the Queen of England, Queen Victoria. Yes, Queen Victoria. He's summoned to help Queen Victoria as her husband, Prince Albert, is dying, and within hours of arriving, his young ward is nearly killed and his room is ransacked. And it follows him as he tries to discover who might want him dead or want his ward dead, why somebody is targeting him, and what exactly is happening in Windsor Castle. The last path I'll be pulling from is the Goddess Path. The first prompt for this path is to read a book with a non-human main character. So for this I've decided to go with Good Omens by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett. I have actually already started this. It's been quite a while. I set it down several months ago and never got back to it. But this follows the demon Crowley and the angel Aziraphale as they are trying to avert the apocalypse. The second prompt for this is also an overlap with the Witch Path. Yes. And this one is to read a book with a foiled cover. And for this go-round, I've chosen The Tiger and the Wolf by Adrian Tchaikovsky, which follows a young woman whose father is the leader of the Wolf Clan. This is an Iron Age fantasy, by the way. And her mother is from the Tiger Clan. These clans have been at war for many years, and she is able to shift into either a tiger or a wolf, as all people can shift into their clan's animal. Something horrible is coming that will probably test everybody, and in the meantime, the protagonist, whose name I don't know how to pronounce, Manaye, I think, has to escape her father. The next prompt for this is to read the highest rated book on your TBR. I decided to do this via Goodreads, but I do have the slight problem that not all of my physically owned books are in my Goodreads Want to Read TBR, and additionally not, like, the vast majority of what's in my Goodreads TBR is not something that I own physically. So what I did was I sorted these by highest rated, and I just scrolled until I found the first highest rated of one that I own. So for me, this is The Martian by Andy Weir. I understand this is a sci-fi and that it's supposed to be quite funny. It's about a man who's on Mars and has to survive there for a time. And yeah, that's all I know about it. That's all I really want to know about it. I kind of want to go in a little bit blind. It sounds really interesting. I've heard good things about it, and I see that the audiobook, at least the one on Audible, I assume that's the only version, is narrated by Joss Whedon. So I think that'll be fun. The last prompt for this is to randomize your TBR. Luckily for me, I've already been doing this for the last few months. I actually have a spreadsheet of all the books that I own, and they all have a random number generator between 1 and 20 next to them. And I have, the last couple of months, been rolling the die, rolling my d20, and seeing what number it gives me and making my TBR by picking books from there. So what I did for this was I rolled the die once, I got the number 19, and I pulled a bunch of different options that had the number 19. I ultimately ended up picking, I believe this one's an ebook. Yes, so I ended up picking one of my ebooks, and this is If I Understood You, Would I Have This Look on My Face?, which is a nonfiction book written by Alan Alda that's about his adventures in communication. And he has opened a center, and I can't remember which university, one of the ones in New York, I believe, but he's opened a center for teaching scientists how to communicate better with, each other and with non-scientists. So it's all about communication, particularly science communication, which is great because that's kind of what my job is. So yeah, those are all of the books that I am planning to read for the Make Your Myth-Taker Readathon. I don't expect I will read all 16, but I am hoping that I'll read my original 4 and maybe a couple of the others, so I can add a few more traits and really create Billy Lurk again. Recreate Billy Lurk. But yeah, I'm really excited about this. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm doing this in lieu of my usual TBR because I really don't need to add like 12 more books to choose from on top of this. This is ridiculous, and this is also part of why I decided to pick books for all of the prompts for the Witch, Goddess, and Mercenary Path. So yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you if you made it all the way to the end of this video. I know it's probably kind of a long one, but I really appreciate it. If you have any thoughts or suggestions, please feel free to leave them in the comments. I would love to read them. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.